I don't know, maybe it's just a little too soon for me to be talking about this one. Ben here, from the archive, obviously, and this is the final episode of the first season of Archive, VHS Vault Volume 1 Amvest Video. And let me just say right up front here that as of my recording this commentary, this episode has not premiered yet, so I have absolutely no idea how this went over. I'm hoping it went over well. But I'm discussing it anyway for two reasons. One, I think this is one of my best episodes of the archive. I think everything just lined up for this one. And also because Amvest Video is just really fascinating, what I can find of it, and there's just a lot to discuss about the individual talking points in this episode that I didn't really have time to get around to. Where to begin? I'm just floundering here. When I was a preschool age kid, I really did have a few public domain cartoon video cassettes, and there was something on one of those tapes that just scared me to death. And I don't remember what it was. I don't really think it was the Happy Hamster, because I think upon my seeing the Happy Hamster as an adult, it would have come back to me. But, and there was a cartoon on there that really crawled up my ass too that I've since done an archive riffs on. But there is some truth to this episode. Now, Amvest, I discussed this in the episode, its roots go back to about 1984 when they were working under the name Audio Fidelity Records, which I think is just hilarious because the fidelity of the records is just terrible. But they put out two records, and the first of which was called The Happy Chipmunks Sing Michael Jackson's Greatest Hits. And unsurprisingly, almost immediately, Ross Bagdasarian Jr. filed a lawsuit or a cease and desist order. I'm not entirely sure which. I'm actually leaning towards a full-on lawsuit because there's an allusion to a lawsuit in the second Happy Hamsters record. But obviously what happened in the end was they could not be the Happy Chipmunks, they had to be the Happy Hamsters. And there were two Happy Hamsters records, and they both failed miserably. But the people behind it soldiered on. It's apparently the same people that went on to form Amvest Video. Both formed in Rahway, New Jersey, right around the same time. There's certainly enough overlap to go by. Obviously, the cover of the Happy Hamsters' first album being the biggest giveaway because that became the costume of the Happy Hamster from the videos. But anyway, in 1986 or so, Amvest Video started up, and a lot of people were finally buying VCRs. A lot of non-wealthy, non-tech geek folks were starting to buy them. The price point for a lot of units had started to fall below $300. And so, like I said, a lot of people started buying them up. And in the wake of that, there were all these people going, well, hell, people are going to need tapes for those VCRs, and they probably don't have much money, so you know what? Why don't we just slap something on a tape and put it to market as cheaply and quickly as possible? And that's how you wound up with all these fly-by-night public domain, pieces of crap at the time. And I think the most notable of those companies is Amvest. And I actually have this perverse admiration for Amvest because, like I said, most of these companies, they just slap whatever on a tape and throw it out to the market, and that would be it. But Amvest always seemed to be going that extra mile. They actually had a host for a lot of their tapes. The Kid Picks tapes had the Happy Hamster, and you had the Grandpa series, Grandpa Presents. Obviously, they couldn't say Munster, so it became Grandpa, which I also think is just hilarious. And the name Munster is nowhere to be found because, now I almost get the feeling that there was an attitude of, I want to fail at times in Audio Fidelity Records and subsequently Amvest Video. On the second Happy Hamsters record, there's all these references to, we are indeed hamsters, not chipmunks. Well, I don't know how many people are gonna get that one. I'm not sure how many people were following the mythology there. But, it seems kind of weird and pointless to do something like that. And then when it went over to Amvest Video, and you've got the Grandpa's Sci-Fi Hits tape, which I show you in just a bit, on the label you've got a drawing of an alien giving you the finger. I mean, to me that just spells self-defeating. So it makes it more interesting to talk about Amvest, certainly in that regard. But you just have to wonder, what in the hell was going through these people's heads? Okay, now getting back to Al Lewis here, I mentioned on the 1-900 archive episode that I was kind of surprised that he'd had his own 1-900 number and that he was trying to sell it in the guise of Grandpa Munster, although of course the name Munster was nowhere to be found. But as time has gone by and I've seen more of his doings, I'm less and less surprised. And it also kind of tells me that he would do just about anything for a paycheck. And so that just adds to the intrigue of the Grandpa Presents series. And I want to point out a difference here between this and the subsequent Grandpa Presents tapes. I showed a partial trailer for one of them on a previous episode of the archive, trying to build up to this episode. And in that one, Grandpa looks like he just threw on his cape and called it good. But here, he's just got the most ghastly makeup. I mean, even by the standards of his character. And so, I don't know if he did it himself or what, but I have never seen anything like this.
Grandpa, don't you remember the time you left?
Now, you just gotta love the loads of continuity errors and just all-around bad production of this. This has some of the absolute worst audio I've ever heard. I think they were probably just using the built-in mic on a camcorder for this. Everything is so distant, and it sounds like it was in a warehouse. It just echoes forever. And the sets are just something to behold. I mean, this is not art design. This is some idiot with a few markers. Having said that, I love when he gets into the ship here, quote-unquote ship, that there's a fire extinguisher on the wall with a picture of a bat on it, a la Batman. There it is. And I could not let that slide. It got me thinking back to Nostalgia Critic and Bat Credit Card. And so I couldn't let that one go. Bat fire extinguisher, really? Another thing I've noticed is I think everything was pretty much from the same standpoint from the camera. Everything was in the same position. It's very rare that they would shift. So that tells me they had just a little dinky space with just enough room for a green screen backdrop, and that was it. You notice that a lot of the quote-unquote furniture is out of shot in these things. Grandpa appears to be alternately sitting in an office chair and probably a rented prop. I don't know. His assistant Igor, you notice towards the end of this riff, his voice drops big time for no reason whatsoever. And a lot of these jokes are such total non sequiturs that part of me wonders if they were snorting something illegal when they were making this, because I just can't imagine anybody that professional letting something like this slide. Obviously, like I've said several times now, it makes it really interesting from my point of view, but you just have to wonder what was going on here.
The Earth's atmosphere and get home. Already, Grandpa? Well,
now, I consider myself fairly desensitized to a lot of the things that I watch, just because I've spent enough time doing the archive now, and that I've seen a lot of really weird and bad stuff, and of course, I've seen a lot of MST3K, and I've seen a lot of Cinema Snob and a lot of stuff, so I think I've seen my share of bad. But the close-ups of Grandpa Munster here, excuse me, just Grandpa, just made me jump. I mean, it is just thoroughly terrifying. And during the credits, this riff was actually supposed to be a bit shorter, but I just got on a roll. Normally, I write most of my riffs, but sometimes I just ad lib. And on this one, I just kept on going. I just kept rolling right through the credits. I was so disgusted with this and amused at the same time that I guess inspiration just hit. And I go on about paint box, yeah, more like crayon box. And I think the only real great failure, and I make note of it here, is that I think I kind of overdid the copyright jokes. Image for you to think about while falling asleep. Now, coming out of this, I finally start to discuss the Happy Hamsters albums. And when I was listening to them, it got me thinking about the construction of the Chipmunks albums. Now, if you know how those were made, the playback would get cut in half for the recording of the vocals. So it would cut everything down in octaves. So say it was in the key of D, it would still be in the key of D. You could sing in the same key to it. You just had to sing a bit slower. Now, the Happy Hamsters albums were done with the vocals recorded at 75% of the original speed, so slowed down by 25. And splitting the difference between an octave and normal speed, that's a flat fifth, 6 semi-steps out of the chromatic 12-step system, which is one of the most dissonant, difficult intervals. So the poor guy that was singing this stuff had to sing it a flat fifth lower, which it sounds just otherworldly when you play it at that speed. And I found that sweet spot, like I said, of where they were actually recording it, and I play it over the credits just so you know what it really sounds like. But I really didn't understand why they would do that. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but whoever did the voices did it with aplomb. He did a pretty damn good job. Now, I have to mention that, you've got the Michael Jackson album, and Michael Jackson is such a huge part of the pop culture vocabulary that I think you listen to his records and you just kind of take it for granted. And I noticed when I was listening to the Happy Chipmunks / Happy Hamsters that I had never really listened to Michael's lyrics before, and they're a little neurotic. They're a little strange. And so you listen to the Happy Hamsters version of these songs, which is to be geared towards children, and it just makes it really weird and surreal. I mean, Billie Jean, I think we all know that Billie Jean is about a woman accusing her of him fathering her illegitimate child, which is probably not something that should be on a children's album, in my opinion, but it is. And that's just another symptom of how goofy the Happy Hamsters stuff is. And then sometimes, I'd find just that right off lyric, like on Human Nature. There's a line about New York being the Big Apple. Let me take a bite. If this town is just an apple, let me take a bite. Well, I decided to play it a little bit out of context, starting with let me take a bite. And so it sounds like the hamsters want to take a bite out of you. But, and there's another line in Human Nature, why does he do me that way? Which could be misconstrued quite easily. And like I said, it just kind of adds up to this perfect storm of weird. Now, on the Happy Hamsters Go Ghostbustin', the songs are a little more kid-friendly. It's Ghostbusters, and it's a few themes from various movies. But the thing about the second Happy Hamsters album is a lot of it is just dialogue. The songs are almost secondary. They never shut up. And the jokes are like Oddity Archive bad. Which is kind of funny, but it makes it a very maddening, annoying listen, even by the rather low standards of a kid's record. Terrible, all things considered. I think it was just good old dumb luck that I happened onto a copy of the first Happy Hamsters album. Wish it could have been the Happy Chipmunks, the original pressing, but you take what you can get. Unfortunately, it did not come with a poster, as I mentioned in this episode. And it ties in right back to Amvest Video. I have a feeling they could not get rid of all the records before vinyl disappeared, so they took all those posters that came with the album and they just made it a part of the Happy Hamster fan club, which I discuss at the end of the episode here. And I think I've done quite well gathering material for this. It's been slightly costly, but especially trying to dredge up Happy Hamster vinyl, which is apparently a very hot commodity. Unfortunately, I was not able to find any Kid Pix ephemera. Unfortunately, I've rooted around eBay and stuff, and I have not been able to find the t-shirt or any of the promotional materials that came with it. I've just lucked out in the Kid Pix videos. I'm such a regular thrift store, flea market sort of dweller that I just kind of come across these things just out of sheer tenacity. I'm always there. I'm always looking. So that's how it happens. And the story here I'm telling about that Flip the Frog tape is true. It has all those stickers on it, and it was shrink wrapped for the umpteenth time. It was sun faded, and you could tell that it had passed through several hands before it got to me. I paid the princely sum of 50 cents for that, by the way. And then this is another weird thing about Amvest. You've got a tape like this, which has a pretty nice cover, all things considered. And on the other hand, you have the Flip the Frog tape, which looks like, some 5-year-old attempted to draw one of the cartoon characters. So again, it just keeps on going with this company. My childhood. Now, I admit I am not the fastest writer in the world. In fact, I'm probably one of the slower ones. But this riff just pretty much wrote itself. I mean, I knocked this out in 15 minutes tops. And, hi, Happy Hamster. When I went to record this, it came out so easily that I was able to do several takes of this, and I was really able to pick and choose the best delivery of each joke. And also, just looking at this, I mean, to me, this just screams Oddity Archive. This is just, like I said earlier, when I first saw this, it was one of the most obvious choices for the show ever. And shifting gears here, on a technical note, pretty much everything's overscanned on home video, so when you see it on TV, especially in old tube TV, you're only seeing about 80 to 90% of the picture. But these were really overscanned. I mean, when I'm getting the footage off the tapes here, I run it through my camcorder, and it really, really overscans. So a lot of times there's kind of a small black box around everything, but not this time. And indeed, when you watch this just on the VCR, just on a normal old school tube TV, it cuts off enough of the picture that it's really just the Happy Hamster in your face. There is hardly any dead space around it, so it's actually slightly less terrifying this way because, like I said, he's really in your face. The artwork in the background there is actually a little nicer than you tend to see on a lot of Kid Pix tapes of the ones that I've come across. God, he still creeps me out a little bit. The Kid Pix Happy Hamster fan club, he gets to there being a newsletter, and I've rooted around eBay for it, and I've just really wanted to at least just see a copy of this newsletter, and I have not been able to find a copy. Indeed, I don't know if they ever made any, because, I mean, think about it. How many kids actually joined this club? I'd imagine only a handful of kids ever actually saw this, or these tapes. And I have a feeling very, very few, if any, actually wrote in. But I'd kind of like to know what they wrote in and to see just how Amvest dealt with it, especially given that this is the company that put out the tape with a picture of an alien flipping you off on the label of the tape. Now that box, that Kid Pix box, that's pretty well representative of a Kid Picks tape. Like I said, usually it looks like something that some guy just scrawled out, some really half-assed attempt at drawing a picture of whatever cartoon character. Now, I have to mention that at the time when all these public domain fly-by-night companies were out, a lot of stuff was in the public domain that has since managed to weirdly fall back out of the public domain. And so I'm wondering if, in, say, Disney's quest to reclaim the few cartoons of theirs that had slid into the public domain in the late 80s, I wonder if Amvest didn't get tied up in some lawsuits, just being an unintended casualty of this. Of course, just seeing how their attitude is in running this company, it tells me it was probably just a little of everything. It was their not caring. It was being slightly dubious legally. And, it all makes sense in the end. I just... The only great piece of the puzzle that I haven't been able to find with Amvest is what exactly happened. I mean, I'm sure it got sunk due to lawsuits, but I have no idea whatever became of it, the people involved. Nice touch. Now, I mentioned at the end of the riff there a little noise that comes out of the tape, and it got me wondering if Amvest actually put their product out on secondhand tapes, because it sounds like a bit of something else that was previously on the tape that just leaked through. Of course, I have no way of knowing, but it doesn't sound mechanical. It doesn't sound like anything like a tone to be sent to a duplicating machine or anything like that. And indeed, the print, if you will, that you saw of my 2 Kid Picks tapes that I have, that's actually far and away the best copy I own. I mean, the quality is so bad that the picture is always losing grip and stuff. And I love this little stinger. I knew this one was going to be a little scary. Let's just play it at half speed and put in the creepiest part of the Happy Hamsters album, and yeah, it'll make sense. Anyway, this episode's been over for quite some time now. This is Ben from the archive. I'm out of here.